I first became aware of the Illuminati as such when I was able to start my research. Now, I realized when I first got out of the Bureau and started working these type cases, the McDonald case, and it grew from there, that there was something drastically wrong, because we had case after case. I had case after case where there was a cover-up, not only by the federal government, by the FBI and DEA, and but also by the locals, the LAPD. I have a case, a classic case where the LAPD covered up, and so one thing led to another, and then as I developed the information and started researching and started going into the book, so to speak, and rather than just interviewing people, I was able to put it all together. And Illuminati, there's a book out that really woke me up, and it's called Pawns in the Game by William Guy Carr. William Guy Carr was a retired naval commander, Canadian, and he couldn't understand why we had all these wars and all these problems in the world. So he started researching it, and his book really lays it out. And as a matter of fact, on page 26 of that book, Pawns in the Game, it outlines the 25 goals of the Illuminati, which were announced at a conference May the 1st, 1776, by a defrocked priest named Adam Weishaupt in Germany. And these 25 goals included corrupt the youth through sex and drugs, elect your own people to office, meaning the Illuminati, control the media. If you can't elect your own people, put your people in there as agenteurs and agents and advisors. And the list just goes on and on and on. And that list, that 25 goals are I'd say right now about 85% complete. But that was what the book, where I read it in that book, and then that dovetailed into the satanic movement in this country, because Illuminati and Satanism are one and the same as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I've talked to Satanists who have dropped out of the movement, so to speak, or are still victims and on the run, and they've told me, said, we're Illuminati, and there's absolutely no question about it. Illuminati is a satanic organization. And then in further research, it became apparent that the Illuminati had infiltrated virtually every level of society in our country, and particularly the governments, the various governments, federal, city, state, and on down, city councils, law enforcement, intelligence community. They have not missed a lick. I mean, the goals were 230 some years ago, and they have advanced. They started out with 2,000 members, and leading scientists, businessmen, bankers, and so forth. And look what they've done. And look at the control they have. And if you want total control, you got to take over the money, and they've taken over the money through the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve is not a federal agency, it's a private organization run by the Illuminati. Absolutely no question about it. Well, I can say this without any hesitation. The Illuminati / Satanism is about 1.5% of the population in this country today. That's a lot of people. That's millions of people. And I derived that figure from 3 different sources. I had one source, this is back in the 1980s, who told me there were about 3,000 Illuminati / satanic members in the South Bay area of Los Angeles. That's about a population of about 200,000. Another source, Lincoln, Nebraska, about 200,000. Told me there's about 3,000 there. And another source, Iowa City, Iowa, told me there's about 1,500 in Iowa City, Iowa. At that time, Iowa City, Iowa was about 100,000 people. So if you project that figure nationwide, you're looking at 1.5% of the population. I used to live in Manhattan Beach, California, which is South Bay area. I just mentioned a few moments ago. And I was actively involved in the investigation of the McMartin preschool. In the McMartin preschool, this is back in the 1980s, a young child, this is preschool, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old children, up to 5 years of age. And the children said that there were tunnels under the school, you went in, the entrance was under the rabbit cage outside classroom number 4. And there were tunnels that had been, and they went through the tunnels up into the trap door of the triplex next door. And they were taken out in automobiles and prostituted in the community. And the authorities went out after this and looked, and this case broke in 1982, I think it was. And the authorities went out in 1987 went to the school looking for the tunnels, couldn't find them. In 1990, they had a trial. The old lady, Virginia, I think was her name, and Ray Bucky, the son, they had the preliminary hearing alone, I think, was a year or 2 years. And the school had been given to Danny Davis, the attorney, representing the defense attorney, and he had sold it to a contractor, and the contractor was going to tear down the school and build an office building on it. I heard about it. I gained control. I gained access to it, not control. Through the contractor asked if I could be on the grounds, go on the grounds and look for the tunnels. I hired an archaeologist from UCLA, Dr. Gary Stickle. He brought in this team of archaeologists, of specialists, and within 34 days, he said, yes, there had been tunnels under the school, and they were filled in. The children said there was a chamber underneath classroom 4. There were 4 classrooms. And that was known as DOG, D-O-G room. Actually, it's God spelled backwards. And the tunnels went in through the chamber under classroom 4, and then out and then around the edge of the school, the foundation, then up into the trapdoor, as I mentioned. And Dr. Stickle said he found a 9-foot chamber there that had been filled in. The tunnels had been filled in. The children said that in the chamber they attended sessions where brown babies were cut up. And there were adults there with robes, nude, but chanting with candles, obviously a satanic ceremony. And so they had one trial, and the Virginia was acquitted. The grandmother was acquitted. I think her name was Virginia. Ray Bucky was hung jury, so they had a second trial. We found the tunnels. Dr. Stickle said there were tunnels there that had been filled in the middle of the second trial. And I called the district attorney's office. They sent an investigator out named Perez. And Perez wanted to argue with our Dr. Stickle. There were no tunnels there. Here he is. He's not an expert. Stickle is an expert, right? Anyway, they didn't even use it. In the middle of the second trial, they could have used the tunnels in the trial. Also, I had an informant tell me that the children were taken up into the mountains for ceremonies. And the informant told me exactly where that location was. And the house on that location burned down the day after the information was made public in the newspapers about this case, that the allegations of McMartin preschool involvement in this activity. The house burned down on this site, and I went up there and took pictures. And it was built on like a fortress built on the side of the mountain. It extended, probably 100 yards. And the only way you could see it was from the air. It was on the side of the mountains, aside from where the road was. In other words, you'd have to get out of your car and walk up over a hill and look down. I know this is where the kids were taken, because the kids talked about being flown up into the mountains. As far as I'm concerned, the McMartin preschool case, the whole case was a farce. The kids were telling the truth. The police, when they interviewed the kids, claimed that the therapist had planted this information in the children's minds. This is a huge, huge cover-up. About this same time, other cases were exposed around the country. There was one in North Carolina, another one in Oregon. I think Washington had one. And stop and think about this. The Satanists want to get their hands on these kids young, when they're real young, right? And by getting them when they're young, they can get them MK Ultra mind control program, instill it into the kids. For example, one of the little girls in the McMartin case, mother and father both worked. They went into her house, got her kitten, brought her kitten out. This is according to I talked to a little girl myself, and sacrificed that kitten in front of this other children and said, if you talk, we're going to do this to your brother or to your mother and father. It was satanic all the way, absolutely no question about it. But they want to get their hands and indoctrinate these kids in preschool, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of age. And that's part of the MK Ultra mind control program. I happen to know of dependents, military dependent children, who are victims of this. And they may not even realize it. But this is going on. This is going on in America. Wake up, America.